The alarm server generates alarms when process values are in abnormal conditions. Detected alarms could be logged into a database and redirected to users on email and SMS. The alarm server configuration is stored in a database. If you have a large application, you may have several alarm servers on the network and therefore also several configurations within this single database. For a simple project, you may just have a default configuration. The default name indicates to the alarm server that it doesn't need to know about node names and just take the configuration called default and bring it to runtime when it finds it. If you decide to change that name to standard, for instance, now you need to indicate to the alarm server that this new configuration name is your standard project to be used to generate alarms. Each configuration can specify to use the timestamps from the input data sources or to use the timestamp of the computer on which your alarm server runs. As we will see later, alarm tags can be enabled or disabled based on properties. And when they are disabled, you may decide if they can be kept on scan in the background so that they are quickly available again when they are enabled, or you would not scan them when they are disabled. ISA mode should be checked by default, and if you uncheck it, it provides compatibility with how the alarm server acted several years ago. So if your customer asks to be compatible exactly to the behavior of an old implementation of your alarm server, you would uncheck it and otherwise keep it enabled. Data input for your alarm server is subscribed to by your alarm server, and we will in this case not get more frequently the data than every 1200 milliseconds. You can increase it or decrease it if needed. On startup of your alarm server, we will wait 1 minute in this case before generating any alarms. In a larger application, you will have multiple configurations. So you will right-click configurations and add an additional configuration and specify apply. To relate your new configuration to the computer on the network, you add a node, add node, call it maybe PC number 2. That's the name of the computer on which that particular alarm server runs, and select the configuration that relates to that computer name. In this example, when the alarm server on PC number 2 starts, it will check and find that it needs to load configuration number 2 into runtime. All alarms in your application are organized in areas. You can add an area, and sub-areas. When alarms are related to areas, it will become easier for the user later on to filter specific alarms only in a specific area. If you filter for alarms in the refinery, you will find all alarms in all the areas. An alarm can also be part of multiple areas. Now, to add a tag, you right-click your configuration and select Add Tag. The alarm tag has a unique name, for instance my tank, and it needs an input from any of your data sources available. It could be a property in your asset structure, it could be a tag from MQTT or any other Internet of Things devices, it could be coming from PACnet databases, or maybe a Modbus point or OPC data sources. So let's take a Modbus tag and take the level and drag it into the field. Template will be discussed later. Each tag can be enabled by default, and if it's set to 0 at any moment, the alarm conditions are not detected for this particular tag. It can also be dictated by an OPC input or a property from your data sources on the right hand side by selecting this tag browser, but let's leave it on 1 right now. The default display could relate to your alarm overview, AlarmWorx display, but it can also relate to any other system or file into the Windows operating system, and in this case brings up a video file for additional instructions for the user. Description can be filled in if needed to provide additional information about your asset. The delay, when specified, like 10 seconds, will cause alarms to wait, and after 10 seconds, if the alarm condition still is available, then alarms are generated. So this will be useful if you have, for instance, a digital state for a door. The door goes open, it doesn't stay open long, no alarms is generated, but if it stays open for 11 seconds, you will see an alarm. Keeping the field empty will mean that the system will immediately detect the value of the process and detect if there are any alarm conditions. The base text could be used to give a name. Tank ID 123. And in addition, fields from your limit and your digital and other alarm settings later will be concatenated to this base text to show as a complete text message to the user. Help instructions would be giving the user some extra information. Now also, the tag browser can be used to use a language alias text. And language aliasing means that it will result in a message like something similar to this. And depending on the selection of your user, like Swedish or Chinese or Italian, your help instructions and any other text information using alias notation will switch to the relevant language to the user. Let's keep it in English for now. In the advanced settings, you can specify if your user should be using the ISA 18.2 function set, such as being able to latch alarms on acknowledged or latch on unacknowledged, or specify an alarm to be out of service or suppress by design. Realarm would, for instance, say, if your alarm is acknowledged but not returned to normal within 45 seconds, it will go into the unacknowledged state. Shelving would mean if you put it on the shelf and after 60 seconds it will unshelve. So if the user doesn't want to spend time on this alarm right now because it's not important, it could be shelved. And if you keep the shelving empty, it will stay on the shelf forever until the user will unshelve it, and then it becomes an active alarm again that needs to be taken care of. Configuring an alarm would relate your alarm to the area, and you click here to add this alarm to the area it belongs to. As mentioned, the alarm could be also related to multiple areas. So it could be part of area A and B and C and so on. The configuration of the other settings will be discussed in the next video.